Here's a fact. Your business needs reliable IT support, no matter the size. Enter Aeroforce. As a managed service provider, we offer a range of IT services, from network management, data backup, to a fully customizable help desk. But we also build on the model of the traditional MSP by putting an emphasis on security first. Because in today's digital age, security isn't just important, it's essential. With Aeroforce, you can focus on what you do best while we handle the rest. Visit aeroforce.com to learn more.
You're listening to the Secure AF podcast.
Welcome to the Secure AF podcast. I'm Jonathan. This is Derek. We're going to be talking about HIPAA. Glad you're here with us. The most recent updates to HIPAA has come out in the last couple of months. Comment period, notice for proposed rulemaking, all kinds of things that have a huge effect on the organizations, on all organizations. One of the interesting things is you probably have HIPAA data in your environment. You have some sort of data that is part of a covered entity or going to a covered entity. And so everyone really needs to take into account all the new changes for the proposed rulemaking. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Derek, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Derek is here because this is being sponsored by Aeroforce, a new managed service provider that is a sister company to Alias. So we're really excited to have you here and really excited to be talking about HIPAA.
Happy to be here.
So let's talk about like this. HIPAA has been around since 1996 or thereabouts, and it hasn't had a whole lot of updates. There has been some things that have been added to it over the years. Expanded on some guidances, but on December 27th of 2024, they published in the registry, one of the biggest updates to HIPAA that we've ever seen. And it's in the registry as as proposed rulemaking. So, it was in comment period for a couple of months. And then it is out of comment period. If I remember the numbers correctly, there was a little over 4,000 comments that they received on the new rule. HHS and OCR are going through those. And then once they have made a determination on what the comments are and what they're going to do, then they'll make a final published statement that the rule is in effect. But there's several things that's really interesting in this new rule that I wanted to bring you on, Derek, and talk about, because some of these have pretty significant changes that organizations have to do. The biggest one that just off the top of my head is multi-factor is required, and in fact, I was pulling some notes earlier for the podcast. Not that we ever actually do notes for the podcast, but this one I wanted to, and they had some very strong words talking about multi-factor. Let me see if I can get to it real quick. Now, one of the things that we do have to take in consideration is what is multi-factor authentication. And this, I don't know why, but this does seem to confuse a lot of people in a lot of organizations. But true multi-factor is one of three things, or it's a collection of one of the three things. So it's something you know. So that's a password that you have memorized. It's something you are. So that would be your bio, retina scan, facial recognition, whatever. And then something you have, which is your phone or a YubiKey or an RSA token or something. So you've got to have more than one of those to be multi-factor. If, in some cases, if you have two passwords, so you log in with a password, then you have another password or a PIN, that's not multi-factor. That's still just things that you know. And so when we talk about multi-factor, we got to really think about one of those three things. Now, there is a fourth one that people have talked about over the years of where you're at. but, geolocation or GPS or whatever, but that's really still more of what you have because you've got to have some sort of tracking on you to know where you're at and such. Right. So let me ask you, while I'm finding this, can you talk very quickly about what are some things that you have seen as part of tech support and MSP that people are implementing to get that multi-factor, those 1 to 3 things? What are some things that you have seen out there that organizations have been doing well to meet those requirements?
Yeah, so of course you have a lot of environments that use like Microsoft 365, and I think people are more receptive to adding multi-factor than they are to, updating their password requirements and things like that. But there's other things like, for servers, you can have, multi-factor authentication, to sign into a server. Those are some of the things I've seen. Still trying to get more people to actually enable multi-factor. That's been, some people are, pretty difficult when it comes to multi-factor. They just don't like those changes. So
they don't, but the interesting thing is, we've had multi-factor for a very long time. I remember working with people who they had the RSA tokens. So it was a keychain, a key fob that was on their keys, and it had just this random number, that would just rotate through every 10 seconds, every 30 seconds, whatever. And that was back in at least the late 90s, early 2000s when I remember them having it. So MFA has been around for a long time, but the Google Authenticator that you just download to a phone, it's been around since 2010. So 15 years that we've had easy multi-factor authentication that was not based off of an SMS message or anything. So, it's something with your password, and then something you have, which is your authenticator app on your phone. And we still have organizations that haven't implemented it. Most phones nowadays have some version of multi-factor or can. Face recognition, fingerprint, plus your PIN, plus, it's not difficult anymore. Why do you think organizations are still so resistant to implementing multi-factor?
I think people get comfortable in their environment and they just resist those changes. At the end of the day, it's a very small change, but people, I just think, get very comfortable with what they have already, and they just don't want to implement those changes. And I'll just say, so before I started working in IT, I learned that all my passwords were really terrible.
Right.
And I went through I have like a lot of music software and stuff like that. So I have upwards of 300 passwords.
Right.
But I was able to, within a couple hours, go through every account, every website, change them. Yeah. And the ones that did accept 2FA or MFA, set that up. So it's really not that difficult, in my opinion. I think it's just a resistant.
It is. I think the last time I counted, so this is the last time I went through my password managers. Yes, multiple. I think I have 473 passwords or somewhere around there. That's a lot of passwords. Now, I am using a password manager and I have multi-factor on them. I have a whole variety of multi-factors. Some of them I use, Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, YubiKeys. There's all different kinds of ways you could do it. My preference is either an Authenticator app or my YubiKey. That's just what I like. But it's not difficult. And I found the section, and what's interesting is this is actually written in the proposed rulemaking. This is in the register. And this is what it says. Historically, regulated entities, i.e. covered entities, relied on combination of usernames and passwords to identify users and authenticate users to a system. We, which is, HHS, recognize that such combinations are insufficient to secure sensitive information and that more sophisticated mechanisms for doing so have been developed. So, I mean, they flat out said in the proposed rulemaking that usernames and passwords are insufficient, that better, more secure methods of authenticating an individual are there, and that covered entities need to be using them. And that's what's interesting is this is covering all of the covered entities. And it's saying right here that they need to adopt multi-factor authentication. This is because the next slide says, as a best practice for managing cyber threats, most cybersecurity frameworks, including those discussed above, recommend that organizations adopt solutions that rely on multi-factor to identify and authenticate users. And there's a lot more to it. But, I mean, that one right there, just flat saying passwords and usernames are not enough anymore. You have to get multi-factor authentication in there. So that's pretty significant because there's a lot of covered entities out there that aren't using anything. And, in fact, they're resistant to it. Mm-hmm. We talk about password complexity and even getting them to do more than 8 characters or, a significant, complexity. They won't do it or they don't do it. And there's lots of different kinds of reasons for it. But I think that that's going to have to stop. I mean, yeah, just right here, the new HIPAA regulation is saying you have to do this. Now, here's the thing. This is not the final one, of course. But you talk to any security professional and they're going to tell you multi-factor is a requirement now. If you're going to protect yourself from the attacks. And I heard someone say, I guess this was maybe 2 weeks ago, that multi-factor authentication, as it sits right now, the kinds of attacks we see out in the world, MFA would stop 95 to 97% of the current attacks.
Wow.
That's significant. Now, that changes, of course, because new attacks come out and new vulnerabilities come out and whatever. But can you imagine if we could stop 95% of the attacks by just implementing multi-factor authentication? That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a huge security thing. That sounds like common sense to me, but I'm a CISO, so yeah. I have to say that. So, I mean, that's just one of them. Like, here's another one that we're talking that I found that I think is really important. And I'll read part of it. As described in departmental guidance, regulated entities can defend themselves from common cyber attacks, but hackers continue to target the healthcare industry in search of ways to access valuable EPHI. Accordingly, timely implementation of patches for known vulnerabilities is crucial to maintaining the security of EPHI. So that in the regulation, in the new rule, they're saying, do your patches. This is not a hard thing to solve. I mean, how long have we had WSUS server?
A while.
I was using it back probably early to mid 2000s, using the version of the WSUS server, the first versions. And we've had it since. Patching machines is not hard. Not patching them is really, really dangerous. So what are you seeing right now? I mean, you manage machines. I mean, you manage workstations and servers and stuff. What are you seeing out there as it relates to just normal patch management?
As far as just the normal patching process? Or?
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about patching processes and why organizations don't do it.
Well, I mean, they may not do it because they don't have a solution to perform the patches for them.
But, I mean, most workstations have automatic updates.
I think you want a real patching solution just because there are feature updates and things that come out with Windows, and those sorts of things have a tendency to break other things.
Yeah.
So you'd really want a solution to where you can delay certain patches if you needed to.
That's fair. I guess on the security side, I don't want them to delay those patches.
Well, yeah. I'm just talking about like feature updates and those sorts of things.
I get that. I mean, I always tell people you want to do critical and high. Yeah, you want to get those patches out. Or anything related to security, security related patches. So why do you think organizations, and let's stick to, let's say small to medium, but why do you think they don't have a tool, they don't get a tool? Do you think it's because they just don't know or they don't have the resources? What's your thoughts on that?
I would think it more boil down to that they don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of clients that we see, they can be what we would call like a break-fix environment, where they have an IT person that's in and out. When something breaks, they come in and fix it. So they may be doing automatic updates, but sometimes you have to apply those updates, and if there's no one there to do that, then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. And I get that. I mean, I teach a small little cybersecurity for small business course for a local tech school. And I do it a couple times a year just for the fun of it. And one of the things I tell them is they got to have a process to do their updates. And what I recommend to them, and it doesn't matter what size they are, they might have one machine, they might have 5, they might have 400. I tell them that they need to, let's say they're a small organization, small environment, they have 5 machines. You sit down once a week and you go through your patches. So you sit down on a Sunday afternoon and you just go to each machine, Windows updates. And then you go to each application you have and check to see for updates. A lot of them have something in the settings that you can tell it to check. Yeah. If you don't, then you look at the current version you have, and then you go out on the internet and see what version is out there. And some of these free software, and that's the thing is, we're not just talking about patching your Windows operating system. We're also talking patching all of those applications. Notepad++. Is a very common one out there. Green Shots is a very common. Free. People use them, see them on all computers. They need to be checking the versions and doing the patches on them. Any application you have on the machine, you need to patch. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a section in here. Here it is. Many cyber attacks could be prevented or substantially mitigated if regulated entities implemented activities to manage the implementation of patches, updates, and upgrades to comply with the security rules requirements for risk management. Organizations are being compromised by these vulnerabilities in this software. We just had one, it was, I guess a month ago, but the RMM tool was compromised.
Yeah.
That's huge. Tell us what an RMM tool is, and tell us what happens if an attacker gets a hold of that.
Oh, well, so an RMM tool is a remote monitoring and management tool. It is a software that we install on, say, a Windows computer. We can apply updates automatically. We can set up alert policies for any, antivirus alerts. We have a remote terminal that we can get into to troubleshoot a machine, or we can also remote into the machine. Most of the RMMs have a remote function. But yeah, if an attacker was able to get access to an RMM tool, that's really dangerous because, like I said, they have access to all of these things. They can remote into computers. They could get into the terminal, create a local admin account, and sign into, one of the servers. And now everything's compromised at that point.
Yeah. The tool has to have the right rights to be able to do support. Mm-hmm. But those are also the same rights that an attacker wants.
Yeah.
So if they can compromise the RMM tool, they've got access to everything. Now, there's things that you can do to protect against that, of course, but, that's just one of them. And the incident that I was referring to earlier, the RMM tool itself had a vulnerability, and then the clients got affected by that. So the MSP had an RMM tool. It was vulnerable. It got compromised, and at least one of the clients got compromised through that because that was the ones we were working with. And it's really scary when a tool like that gets compromised because they have access to everything at that point. So we've talked about a couple of the individual pieces that is within the rule. Now, one of the things that I find it amuses me to no end, when you read this, now there's 660 pages of this new proposed rule, and I've read all of them at least a couple of times. And it's actually kind of funny. There are pieces in there where we're talking about why they're making these changes. These small to medium hospitals, they're not implementing, they're not doing the resources. In fact, here's one specifically talking about resources. And here's what it says. Again, this is in the proposed rulemaking. So it's on the website, it's in the register. Many people, including regulated entities, inaccurately believe that only large regulated entities that maintain electronic records about millions of individuals are likely to face a cyber attack, and thus it is less important for the smaller regulated entities to invest in cyber resources. In fact, smaller regulated entities may also be the target or adversely affected by cybercrime, partly because of the interconnections of the healthcare and partly because it's less likely to have to invest in cybersecurity. So that right there, they're saying that smaller entities don't think that they're going to be a target, therefore they don't invest in cybersecurity. And the attackers know that. They're like, absolutely, we're going after them. And it's the same with small business as well. The other piece of it is, let me get down to it because it's talking about the resources that an organization provides. And they're just flat saying that the covered entities are not putting out the resources for security. And they make a comment in here specifically that it may be because they don't know. They don't know the risks, or they're choosing to ignore the risk because they think that they're not really a target. And they can't do that anymore. So it's really interesting. I would advise you, I know most people don't like reading compliance and reading policies, but I think really people should go out there and read this because I found it funny. Now, so some of the things, we're going to get kind of more details, and I want to ask you a few questions, Derek. So on their webpage, on the hhs.gov website, they have kind of a summary of these changes. And really I want to talk to how you think this is going to impact organizations. So the first one here, require written documentation of all security rule policies, procedures, plans, and analysis. What do you feel organizations are going to do if they have to have written documentation across the board for all of their policies, procedures, their risk analysis, all that? I mean, how do you think they're going to be able to do that?
Well, I hope that they have an internal IT department that can do these things, because if they don't, then it seems like they're going to, I don't know, maybe the HR person does it.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of scary.
But I would hope that they have a dedicated IT person to do these things. It's just going to be difficult if they don't have that and they have to pull someone else in, and then everything, may get lost and just.
Yeah. And it's also why having like an MSP, they can help you write this stuff. I mean, that's one of the benefits of going with somebody who is a professional IT person who does that job is, I'm sure that Aeroforce, as you're otherwise working with the organization to build their processes, writing the documentation is useful to you as well. So you got to have both those pieces there. But I think you're right. I think they don't have somebody. And a lot of these organizations, I've had hospitals call me, and I was talking to one of the doctors because they just happened to be the the IT person in that organization. And that's very odd. Having the doctor be the IT person, those are two completely separate skill sets. So, yeah, I would say having a dedicated person, a professional, and I'm going to put that qualification on a professional person doing it, not just someone who has played around with IT or feels comfortable with IT, someone who actually does it as part of their job.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's one. Require the development and revision of a technology asset inventory and network map that illustrates the movement of PHI through the regulated entities' information systems. And I chopped it up just a little bit so I could read it quicker. But this is not only an asset inventory, so you got to know where your computers are at. not only a network inventory, know how your network is set up, but actually knowing where your protected health information is. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, doing an inventory is hard enough, but now you got to go, okay, what computers have PHI on them?
Yeah, that's could be a lot of work for an organization to figure out all those things by themselves. But yeah, I would assume we would need to speak to each department and see who is transferring that PHI, and eventually we would get to a sort of like a network diagram of where it's moving to. But yeah, again, a dedicated IT person, I think, needs to be looped in on those things.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things that I've told people in the past, not specific for HIPAA, but some other privacy compliances that I deal with, is even in your regular asset inventory, the tool you use to maintain your list of computers, putting a field in there that says, hey, this has in-scope data on it, GDPR, FERPA, HIPAA, whatever. That's a starting point. If you know that computer has, let's say in this case, HIPAA records on it, make sure it's in the inventory that is a HIPAA in-scope computer. That's an easy flag. I've seen people who do it with, again, keeping it simple, small organizations, but they do it by the host name. They make sure that there is something in the actual host name of the computer to signify that is, it has HIPAA on it or PHI. Now, your reason you do that is because, for me, from a security perspective, if IT touches that computer, they have to treat it a certain way. You don't just take a computer, reimage it, and go deploy it back out because that had HIPAA data. You need to make sure you DoD it or you wipe the machine and make sure it's not recoverable. You have to protect the data on there in a secure fashion. So you have to know that, I've had some people, they put red stickers on, just so that if an IT person picks up a computer and they see, oh, it's got a red sticker on it, this is a special computer, it has special data on it. So simple little things is really, really critical. But I think you're right. I think understanding where that data flows, where it starts, the data lifecycle has 4 things in it. Number 1, how data enters into the organization, or how you receive data. How do you store the data? How you use the data and who? And then how do you destroy the data? So that's the data life cycle that we talk about. And when you're creating an inventory, you truly have to think about it from the very beginning of how does the data come into the organization? And then how do you destroy it in the end? And what is the timing and whatever. One of the interesting things is, you have to maintain HIPAA records for a certain period of time. Mm-hmm. And this was many years ago now. But we had an issue where there was HIPAA records on a machine that the hard drive was reimaged. But the records that were on that was the only copy. So we had a HIPAA situation where we had to contact OCR and let them know that we had these records that we were supposed to maintain for a period of time, and we couldn't because we reimaged the computer. Now, they shouldn't have been on the workstation alone. They should have been in the appropriate locations. There's all of these different things, but this was probably 15 years ago now. This was a long time ago. But some of these things right now they're talking about, you have to know where your data is at. And that was one of those situations. They didn't know where the data was. They didn't know that was the only place to put it. And that caused an issue. So, all right, let's get to another one here. Here's a fun one. Require notification of certain regulated entities within 24 hours when a workforce member's access to ePHI or certain electronic information systems is changed or terminated. Now, this is if you have a workforce member, so that's an employee or a contractor, whatever, that if they've been terminated or if their access has changed for whatever reason, there has to be an official notice for within 24 hours. That's huge. And I can almost guarantee you that most organizations do not have that set up with their vendors. So if something changes with the vendor, in fact, it wasn't HIPAA related, but we had this issue. One of my clients, had this issue where they were trying to get a hold of someone at their vendor, and they had been gone for like 6 months, but they were never notified. In this particular thing, with the way it's saying is they have 24 hours to let them know, which makes sense. You want to know when someone is leaving so you can adjust permissions or adjust settings or do whatever. So that's, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about these? What do you think about this from an institution's perspective?
I feel like that's could be a little difficult to adjust to, I don't know, making a logbook or something to figure out when people are leaving and when they're in the system. So yeah, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah,
to implement, I would say.
Do you think? I mean, we've only talked about 4 or 5, 6 of them today. How do you think organizations are going to see this? I mean, what would be, knowing that you work with a lot of different organizations and you do tech support for them, but I mean, have any of them come to you and asked you about these new HIPAA changes?
No, I really haven't had many come to me, so I'm not sure who's notifying them, but it sounds like, the most of the IT providers need to be notifying their clients about these changes. So
yeah,
but I haven't heard someone come to me
directly
and say, "Hey, all these changes are happening. What can you do for us?"
Right.
So,
well, and that's the thing. It's not in effect yet. I know on the security side, I've been reaching out to my clients saying, "Hey, we need to be ready for this. There's some significant changes." And I would imagine as things get a little closer, you guys at Air Force are going to be reaching out to your clients and just say, "Hey, what is it you need us to do?" You're a BAA with them, or you're a business associate, a vendor with them, and they need to let you know what their requirements are. But I would say some of them are not even aware that these changes are happening.
Yeah.
And that's kind of scary because these changes are out there. These changes are, and they've been out for, since December 27th for sure. So people could go and read them. And a lot of people won't go read 660 pages.
Yeah.
I do. I like doing that, but it's really important for people to do that. Like, here are some other ones. This is a requirement now. Establish written procedures to restore loss of certain relevant electronic information systems and data within 72 hours. So you have to be able to bring back services within 72 hours. A lot of organizations, they look at that from the point of view of how long would it take you to bring it back up? Well, it'd take us a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And no, they have to put the resources in to recovering it within 72 hours. That's huge.
Yeah.
I would say some organizations may not even be able to do that because it's complicated. You can't just bring up one system. You have to bring up all your dependencies to get that one system up and running. So that's a big one.
Yeah, we have a client that we recently onboarded, and they have roughly 35 servers. And their current disaster recovery solution, I don't think it would be possible for them to bring all of those back up within 72 hours.
Yeah, and this would be like if you had a complete outage, you now have to rebuild it in 72 hours. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the worst case scenario. But do you think, let me ask you, we should all be doing tabletops? Tabletops is a huge thing in security, and that's, we want people to practice this and know what their tools can do. But do you think people are thinking about complete outages like that, or do they feel like, they might have an incident, a server go down, and they can recover from backup. But we had one last year that the attackers deleted all the backups. And they had to start from scratch.
Wow.
And I want to say it was 8 or 10 weeks they were down. I mean, they were able to get some stuff up quickly, but to get everything fully functional was 8 to 10 weeks.
That's a long time.
It is. And, I remember talking to the gentleman, and he was saying that they were losing about $1 million a day. So every single day they were down, they were losing about $1 million a day. That's huge. And of course, we did the incident side of it, so they had a IT people to help bring stuff up, but we were just making sure things are secure. But that's huge. 8 to 10 weeks of at least partial outage, and they were down for probably a week or so before they called us. So that's a long time down. And this is saying they have to be back up in 72 hours. Now, but here's the thing. It makes sense. I mean, if their systems are down, they can't treat patients.
Yeah.
In some cases, because it's not just PHI records anymore. It's systems that are managing the treatment of patients. So if they're down for 72 hours, that's 72 hours that there's possibility that patients don't get treated.
Yeah.
So I can see that. I mean, I can see that as a big issue.
Yeah. Yeah, the client I mentioned earlier, we're working on providing them a backup solution to where they can meet that criteria within 72 hours. So they would have an on-site appliance which has basically all of the data from the servers on it. And if they needed to, within 3 minutes, they can boot into those servers. Should the other ones go down. And then they also have a cloud backup, which if something happened in the environment, got ransomware, we could bring all those machines up in the cloud, just do a little bit of networking to connect everything, and they're back up and running. So,
well, and one of the things I've always told people, this goes back to many, many years ago, where we had a system administrator who was in charge of our backups. He was in charge, and then someone else came and took it over. And so he just, kind of sat on the sidelines. And at one point we had a failure at the organization I was at. And so they went to backups to recover it. There was a lot of pieces to it, but basically backups were going into a null volume. So the backups there were backups happening, and then they were being copied to another location, and then space was being made by deleting the backups because you had it on the second location. Apparently the second location was a null space. It was going nowhere. All their systems said everything was fine. But they had a complete failure. They decided to recover from backup. They went to go find the backup files, and they were gone. They just weren't there. And so the person was so they did that. They were able to get something. They pulled it up. It was corrupted. I mean, it was all kinds of problems. And the guy sat over there and says, well, if you don't test your backups, then you don't really have backups. You might, if you're lucky, have files. And that really stuck with me. Is like, okay, well, that makes sense. If you don't actually test your backups and test your backup processes, you don't know what you have. And I was doing this. It was actually, the only reason I know this is because it was the first live event after COVID that I did, live speaking event I did after COVID back a couple of years ago. And I was with Kevin Seesock, who's a CISO friend of mine, and another gentleman out of the FBI field office here in Oklahoma City. And we were talking about backups, and the conversations kind of went there. But of course, Kevin and I, we were having a good time talking about backups and what we need to do. And the FBI agent, who was really great, and I really liked working with him, but there's only so much that he could talk about because, I mean, it's case files and stuff, so it wasn't a lot he could share. But he did share this. He says, there are many times that he goes into an organization that's had some sort of ransomware event or something. And he asks them, do you have backups? And they say yes. He says, great, let's recover them. And they fail.
Wow.
And he says it happens so often that is almost the expectation now. That when they go in and they ask, do you have backups? They're going to say yes, but they haven't tested them. Therefore, they're going to fail. So they just have to work through that process. And I always talk about restoring your backups to full production. I was doing an IT audit yesterday, and we were talking about this, and I asked that question. Do you recover your backups to full production? And the person I was talking to, he wasn't sure. So we went looking and we started asking questions of his MSP. And the answer is they do, but they do it in a sandbox. Well, the problem with that is that's not to full production. You're still in a contained environment, which is okay. But I recommended to him to take that one step further, recover it into a sandbox, make sure it's going to work, and then at some point for critical systems, recover it all the way to production. So here's a perfect way of doing it. Friday night, especially if you're working with virtual machines. Friday night, take a snapshot of your virtual machines. Make sure everything is backed up. It's got the latest backups. Pause the virtual machine or unplug the network or whatever you have to do to take it offline. Then from your backups, recover all the way on that system to full production. Do it over the weekend. Monday morning, start using that recovered machine. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll revert back to the one that you turned off, on Friday. But that way you know all the steps to get you from I have a backup file all the way to a full production environment. And so we made a plan, for them to be able to work on that or to ask their MSP to do that. But it was an interesting concept because the compliance says, do you test your backups? And the answer is yes. But when I said, do you test it all the way to full production? They're like, I've never done that, never considered that. But this is talking about can you recover within 72 hours to full production? And that is huge. So, and that goes right into this next one that I is just kind of popped up here. When you're dealing with a business associate, a vendor, it says require that business associates verify at least once every 12 months for covered entities that they have deployed technical safeguards required by the security rule. So a lot of times you have a BAA, a vendor, and you say you have a 5-year contract with them. You talk to them, you do a risk analysis in the beginning, you run through the 5 years, and then you're done. What this is saying is you have to work with your vendors and get an attestation, a validation every 12 months that they have implemented current security rules. I think that one's going to be just maintaining that. I mean, an organization may have 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, 300 vendors. And if they're a business associate, you have to go out there and talk to them every year and make sure they're doing all of the security rules. So I think that's going to be impactful as well. There's a lot of stuff in this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in this that is different. Now, here's the thing. There's already pushback. I mean, there's already organizations that are pushing back on this saying, hey, we can't do this stuff. And that's really scary.
Yeah.
Because what are you telling the bad guys, the hackers? Oh, we can't implement all these security controls. Which tells me as a CISO, you don't have those security controls, so you're not protecting your environment. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. A lot more people are going to need someone like us to come in.
Oh, sure.
In order to guide them through these changes, because it's not just one thing. It's not, the backups or the flow of PHI happens. It's all of these things. And they need a dedicated person, I think, to help guide them through all of these changes.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's just talk about everything we've talked about. Multi-factor authentication, patching, validation of controls, backups. That's all IT stuff. That's just configurations and implementations. Multi-factor authentication, honestly, with the Microsoft ecosystem, is easy. You turn on a couple of things and click, and poof, you've got MFA ready to go. Patch management, there's dozens of tools out there that help you with patch management. I used WSUS back in the day. I don't know if that's what it's called anymore, but it was the Windows Software Update Server. And it was just a process in which all the machines checked in and had an approval process for pushing the updates and stuff. So, I mean, this is stuff we've solved, at least in the environment. For years, we've had this solved. But they haven't deployed them. So I think you're right. I think in a lot of cases, they're going to need to have that help. They're going to need to have someone who does this as a professional to come in. And I keep harping on that. So one of the things I've actually put in my contracts, by the way, so I do a lot of vendor management, a lot of contracts. And one of the things that I put in there is the fact that I want the security professionals, security personnel at my vendors to receive professional training. And I always get pushback. And I was like, who cares about professional training? I just want them to figure this stuff out. Well, I think that that's a good part of it. I get it. But there is a benefit to professional training. Going out there and getting training from an entity. So here's an example. This was dumb, but I was working with one of my engineers a couple of years ago, and he was not as into training as I was. Now, I love training. I love going out and learning new things. I like structured training. I enjoy it. I literally enjoy it. And he liked to just figure stuff out. And we were having this issue on a piece of equipment. And he was troubleshooting it. And he couldn't figure it out. Well, I came in, and he had made a comment, that triggered a memory from my training. I was like, well, why don't we do this thing? And I didn't know as much about it as he did, but that triggered a memory. But I remembered it from training. I was like, what about this thing? And he stopped and he looked and he goes, how did you know about that? I was like, well, I learned about it in training. So he went and figured out, well, it solved the issue. It fixed the problem. And so that was kind of our inside joke from that point forward, that the training allows you to get experience in a lot of different things, a lot of aspects of that topic or that tool. And you may not use it now, but you need to use it in the future. But what I want with my vendors is I want to make sure that the organization, number one, is supporting their security personnel, is requiring them to go out and get that professional training, because that means they hopefully have skill sets that's going to turn back around into what I get from them. And I think that's super critical. But going back to what you said about having a professional, that's what I feel like a professional is making sure that the person who's doing your IT can look at the things, at these new compliances and go, yes, we can do that with this tool. And having the experience to be able to come back and say, well, RMM, we got to have the RMM tool. Let's go put a professional one in place, not just VNC. VNC, FYI, is not a professional tool. I still see people put that on their servers to manage their servers. Stop. Don't do that. But things like patch management, things like backup recovery, backup testing, all that stuff, we have solved these problems. Maybe we have not solved them, but we have tools to help you solve them out in the industry, out in the world. With that said, I think we've kind of covered the new HIPAA stuff. Do you have any other thoughts, any further thoughts about these new changes and what it's going to mean for the organization?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I think that these organizations are going to need a dedicated person to implement these changes and help guide everyone through them. Even some IT providers, they may need help assistance with this. Because I've seen, a lot of organizations that don't, for instance, they don't implement MFA or they don't test their backups. So yeah, there's a lot to it, and I think definitely people will need a dedicated person to help implement these changes.
Yeah. And I would agree with you on the security side. Same thing. They need a dedicated security person or a team, depending on how big you are. You need to have someone who their job is security. Their job is IT. And then that way you can get that benefit. Here's the other thing I guess I would say to this, kind of that last little thing, is if you have not read the 660 some odd pages of this new proposed rulemaking and processed it to a way to about what you're going to have to do in the future, then you're probably not the right person to be making decisions on this stuff. And I'm not taking shots at anybody. I'm just saying that something like this, you do have to go read it and you have to understand it and you have to pull those pieces out to figure out how it's going to affect your organization. And I think that if you don't have somebody that will do that or can do that or has done that, then I would encourage you to start looking for an alternative. I'm not saying fire anybody. I'm just saying maybe you go get some help. Whether you come to Alias or Aeroforce, or if you're listening to this, across the country or around the world, there are people that do these things. We do it, and I think that's super critical. Again, if you don't have the person that's willing to go even read it and understand it, it's going to be really difficult to implement it. So with that downer, I think that'll be the end of the Secure AF podcast. We do have a lot of great topics coming up soon. So stay tuned. Catch us on, we'll release this out. I think we try to release a podcast every week or every 2 weeks or so. And we always have great topics. Some of them are fun. Some of them, this is fun for me. Compliance is fun to me. But we also do pen testing. And actually, we just had B-Sides. So depending on when you hear this particular podcast, we recorded it after B-Sides. But we're going to be doing a couple of different episodes talking about B-Sides, what we saw at B-Sides. I don't have my belt with me, but I won the CISO showdown, so I should have brought my belt with me. So we're going to have a lot of fun topics coming up in the near future. So tune in. We'll catch you next time. Derek, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Aeroforce, thank you for sponsoring this particular podcast. Everyone have a great rest of your time, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.
The Secure AF Podcast is a production of Alias Cybersecurity. Visit us online at aliascybersecurity.com. All rights reserved.